Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to yet another episode of The Draw Step. Today we have another fun deck build, and I'm going to be very upfront with you. You may not even want to build this deck, because I built this deck and now my friends don't even want me to play it anymore. It is that strong and that obnoxious. So, who are we working with? The commander of this deck is the Beamtown Bullies. Now, if you've ever played against this card, you immediately know how obnoxious this can be. But if you're not familiar with it, here's what it is. So it's one generic, one black, one red, and one green mana and cost. It's a 4/4 with vigilance and haste, and it has tap, target opponent whose turn it is, puts target non-legendary creature card from your graveyard onto the battlefield under their control. It gains haste, goad it at the beginning of the next end step, exile it. So, what are we doing here? Why would you possibly want your opponents getting cards from your library? That doesn't seem like it's very productive. Well, we got some things for that. Before we get into the creature aspect of it, let's run through the not as fun part. So, we got our non-basic lands. Everybody has them, nothing fancy about them. I got 4 forests, 3 mountains, and 3 swamps. Then I do have some non-basic lands, and I'm going to go through these quickly just because there's nothing particularly special about these. You can really swap them out for any non-basic lands. I will put the deck list in a link to the deck list in the description. But again, you can use any non-basic lands that you want to. If you have better non-basic lands, you can throw them in. The point of this is just mana fixing. We want to have all of our commander's colors as quickly as possible. This deck is a very fast deck. We are trying to set up our win con and move through it as quickly as possible. So again, these are the non-basic lands that I use for mana fixing. You can go ahead and use whatever you want there. The only exception is this one combo. It really, I'll be honest, it does not synergize with the deck. It's just fun when it works. So the one non-basic land that I use is Dark Depths. It's a stupid card, objectively. It enters the battlefield with 10 ice counters on it. It does not tap for mana. It does you no good. So when I just said that this deck is about being fast, this is not fast. However, you can pay 3, remove an ice counter from it, and when it has no ice counters on it, sacrifice it. If you do, put a legendary 20/20 black avatar creature token with flying and indestructible onto the battlefield, which is a giant beefy boy. Then the kind of combo with it, so to speak, is Vampire Hexmage, and when it you can sacrifice it and then remove all the counters. So you can lay this, sacrifice it, and instantly turn that into the 20/20. So again, doesn't necessarily synergize with it, but in all of my decks, I love throwing in other little unique bits just to have other ways that the game can play out. Because if you really just have one win con in your deck or one combo that you're looking for, that deck is going to get stale really quickly. Moving right along for the enchantments, we only have 2 enchantments. We have Cemetery Tampering right here. It's a black enchantment. You may mill at the beginning of your upkeep. You may mill 3 cards, and if there are 20 more cards in your graveyard, you may play the exiled card without paying its mana cost because it has Hideaway 5. Really, it's that mill 3 at the beginning of your upkeep because we are trying to fill our graveyard with those cards that we're wanting to pawn off on our opponents. So we have that Cemetery Tampering, and then our other enchantment is Raking Canopy. Whenever a creature with flying attacks you, Raking Canopy deals 4 damage to it. So this is a way that you can punish your opponents who are playing with like flying decks or just really coming at you, because this deck doesn't really have a lot of flying to defend itself. It has a little bit, but not a ton. So you want to have a way to kind of protect yourself there. We do have one battle. I enjoy using battles. They're not the most powerful, but some of them have pretty good abilities. This is Invasion of Mercadia. I think that's how you pronounce it. When it enters the battlefield, you may discard a card. If you do, draw 2 cards. So again, just a way to get more cards into your hand, but also more importantly, get more cards into your graveyard. And if you do complete it, you can pay 3, tap, discard a card, create 2 1/1 blue and red elemental creature tokens. Creatures you control get +1/+0 and gain haste until end of turn. Cool. Again, I don't necessarily care about it. It does lean into the being able to discard cards, so there is that, but the rest of it, not too big of a deal. I have 1 planeswalker in here, and it's Vraska, Golgari Queen. You can +2, sacrifice another permanent. If you do, gain 1 life and draw a card. -3 to destroy target non-land permanent with converted mana cost 3 or less. And then -9, you get an emblem with whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, that player loses the game. So, this is, again, another example of, it doesn't have high synergy with the deck. It does give you kind of a, in case of emergency, you can destroy some of your opponent's stuff. But the big thing is that -9 ability, the being able to kill your opponents, or what does it say? They lose the game. So you can take some of your opponents out in other ways outside of just what your commander is doing, which again gives the deck a little bit more freshness. Next, moving along to sorceries. The first 5 I have in here are really just for ramp. Farseek, Migration Path, Kadama's Reach, Ramp and Growth, probably the most iconic ramp piece, and Explore, which also allows you to draw a card. Now again, all of these, I'm running through them fast because they all do the same thing. They're just getting more mana onto the battlefield as quickly as possible so we can get things rolling. Next I have Riveter's Confluence. You can choose 3, and you can choose the same mode more than once. Draw a card, lose a life, or it can deal 1 damage to each creature and planeswalker you don't control, or you can put a land card from your hand or graveyard onto the battlefield tapped. So again, can be a ramp piece, can do some damage. Really, it has that flexibility in a pinch to take care of whatever you're looking to get done. I now have 2 red cards that are all basically the same thing. Draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards with Faithless Looting, or Cathartic Reunion, which is discard 2 cards and draw 3 cards. So the big thing again, I'm trying to get as many cards into hand, and then those cards I'm wanting to give to my opponents, I'm wanting to get those into my graveyard so I can have plenty of fun surprises to give away to my opponents. Severed Strands and Victimize, kind of similar ideas. The one is really to get a creature from the graveyard, a creature that you want to have, back onto the battlefield if somebody takes care of one of your pieces that you're using, and then Victimize, or Severed Strands rather, can give you some life. I got Chain Lightning, do some damage to an opponent or creature, whatever you need there. Jared's Orders, search your library. Now these final 3 cards, these are huge. These can win you the game because it'll really get you those extra spicy game finishers for you into the graveyard. So Jared's Orders, search your library for up to 2 creature cards, reveal them, put 1 into your hand and the other into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. So you can get one of the big nasties into your graveyard, you can get something that you want to keep into your hand, or it can be another nasty thing that you're putting into your hand and just discarding into your graveyard in a different way. Unmarked Grave. 2 mana, search your library for a non-legendary card, put that card into your graveyard, then shuffle. Hopefully you're picking up what I'm putting down, you're understanding what I'm going for here. Seems pretty straightforward with that one. And then Buried Alive. 3 mana, search your library for up to 3 creature cards, put them into your graveyard, shuffle your library afterwards. Again, we're just getting the nastiest crap out there, throwing it into our graveyard, and then sharing is caring, pass it on to our opponents. Okay, next we're going to buzz through the artifacts really quick. Most of them are just for ramp. Felwar Stone, Golgari Locket, Commander Sphere, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, and last but not least, a Wayfarer's Bauble. Cool. So again, this is about speed. This deck, there are some downfalls to it. If an opponent has a way to exile your graveyard, take out your commander, there are a lot of ways that this deck can technically be countered. So you want to move as quickly as possible. You want to ramp, you want to get your stuff out and be ready within 2-3 turns to just end it all. Well, end the game, not... Wow, that came out wrong. Moving on. I have Puppet Strings. It's a 3-mana artifact you can pay to tap or untap target creature. So again, this would be a way, because in Commander, most times you have 2-3 opponents left. You want to use your commander, take out someone, untap it, tap it again, take out another opponent. And then Magerite Stone, pay 1, untap target creature that has an activated ability with a tap in its cost. It's basically doing the same thing, but for 1 mana less, so it's a little bit more mana efficient there. For instance, I have Infused with Vitality. Until end of turn, target creature gains Death Touch, and when this creature dies, returns to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control, you gain 2 life. Now, maybe you're attacking, maybe you're trying to kill something that your opponent has, but most likely what you would use this for is protection for your commander. If somebody goes to destroy it, you can lay this, bring it back after it gets destroyed. Crushing Canopy for 3 mana, either destroy target creature with flying or destroy target enchantment. I love cards that have that flexibility, so depending on what is called for, if your opponent has a really nasty enchantment that's messing with you, or something flying, cool, take care of whatever you need. Lightning Bolt deals 3 damage to any target. Everybody knows Lightning Bolt. It's useful in a pinch. There's a couple cards that we'll get to where having a Lightning Bolt on hand could win you the game right there. Hostile Negotiations. This card has a lot of words on it. You can pause it and read it if you want, but basically you're getting 3 cards. One of them is going to go into your graveyard, 1 into your hand, and oh yeah, you put them in 2 piles, and then 1 goes into your hand, 1 goes into your graveyard. So again, just depending on what you're looking for there. The Real Possibility, another example of drawing cards and getting stuff into our graveyard. Pause for Reflection. It's 3 mana, but you can convoke it, you can use your creatures, and then prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. So if you're not in good position to pass on your fun stuff to your opponents and they're attacking you, you can use this just to give yourself another turn to breathe for a minute. Riveter's Charm, black, red, green, choose 1, target opponent, sacrifice a creature or planeswalker they control with the highest mana value among creatures and planeswalkers they control. Exile the top 3 cards of your library until your next end step. You may play those cards or exile target player's graveyard. So again, you have that flexibility to do whatever you need, depending on what your opponents are doing. Play with Fire, 1 mana, deals 2 damage to any target. If a player is dealt damage this way, scry 1. So that, again, there's one card in particular that I'm thinking of where that could potentially win you the game. So we are now going to go through, I have the creatures divided into 2 piles. The first pile, these are creatures that you do want to keep. These are ones that you're going to want to get down and use to help with your strategy. The first one is Old Stick Fingers. When you cast a spell, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal X creature cards, because it's a black-green and has X in its mana cost. Put all creature cards revealed this way into your graveyard and put the rest on the bottom of your library on a random order. Old Stick Fingers' power and toughness are equal to the number of creature cards in your graveyard. There's most likely going to be a good deal of creature cards in your graveyard, and this is a way to fill your graveyard with those nasty creatures that you're then going to be passing on to your opponents. Gravebreaker Lamia, I don't know how to pronounce stuff. It's 5 mana, but when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle your library. You can play spells from your graveyard for cheaper, but the big thing is just another way to get those creatures into your graveyard. Weathered Sentinels, this is mostly just for defense. You can go ahead and read it there, but this is just in a pinch. You can protect if somebody is attacking you. Avatar of Woe, if there are 10 or more creature cards, whoa. If there are 10 or more creature cards total in all graveyards, Avatar of Woe costs 6 less to play. And then you can tap and destroy target creature. So this is a way for potentially just 2 black mana. You can get this onto the battlefield and then use it to be able to destroy creatures as you need. Giant, oh my goodness, I don't know how to pronounce this. A Daphage? I don't know. But when it deals combat damage to a player, create a token that's a copy of it. It's a 7/7 with trample, so it's very easy to get in, do combat damage, and just make a whole stinking swarm of these things. I have a friend who has a token deck that I feel like that card could be pretty powerful in. But anyway, Pitless Gargon, it's a 2/2 with Death Touch. Nice little blocker in a pinch, or maybe swing in if you really need to. A lot of these cards are mostly just protecting your board state in a break glass in case of emergency sort of situation if you're not getting the cards into your library that you need, and you need to actually play the game how it was meant to be played. Artisan of Kozilek, it's 9 mana, 10/9 with Annihilator 2, and when you cast a spell, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. So again, there are going to be some instances where you'll have a piece that you really need that an opponent takes out, so that's a way to get it back for you. Master of Cruelties. This is another great example of trying to find other ways within the deck to win the game outside of just relying upon your commander. It's 5 mana in total, 3 colorless, 1 black, 1 red. First strike, Death Touch. It can only attack alone, and when it attacks a player and isn't blocked, that player's life total becomes 1. Master of Cruelties assigns no combat damage on this combat. So this is a wild way where, again, you swing in, you have a way. There are some, like Rogue's Passage. There's a couple different ways, even just with lands, where you can make your creatures unblockable or a creature unblockable, swing in, get an opponent down to 1, and then again, you have like Play with Fire, you have Lightning Bolt, you have a couple different ways where you can just finish them off right there, but that's a fun little one. Sire of Insanity, it's 6 mana, 6/4. At the beginning of each end step, each player discards his or her hand. Now, this is arguable about whether or not it's good or bad for you or your opponents. I mean, everybody's losing their hand either way, but in the long run, you're, trying to get cards into your graveyard anyway, so it really helps you out there. Vile Entomber, 4 mana. When it enters a battlefield, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard. Again, just getting those creatures into your graveyard. Flare of Hatebound. Whenever Flare of Hatebound or another creature enters the battlefield from your graveyard, that creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. We're going to have a lot of creatures entering the battlefield from our graveyard. So on top of whatever nasty effects they have, they're now doing damage as well too. Auric Lore Mage, 4 mana, tap it, search your library for a card, put it into your graveyard, then shuffle. If it's an instant or sorcery, you can put a 1/1 counter on him. Now, we're not going to be doing that. We're not looking for instants or sorceries. We're really just looking for those nasty creatures to put onto into the graveyard. And then last, we have Fauna Shaman. Pay 1 green, tap, discard a creature card, search your library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in your hand, then shuffle. This is a very, very strong piece because not only are we getting those nasty creatures into our graveyard, but we're then filling our hand with more nasty creatures to just continue dumping into our graveyard so we can handle all of our opponents. Now, moving on to the nasty creatures. This is the fun part. All of these cards right here are objectively terrible. Outside of this deck, you probably don't want any of these cards in your deck. They really are not usable from the standpoint of, oh man, this is really great to have in my deck. But when we're giving them away to our opponents, a little bit different story. First one, Boulder Heavyweights. It's an 8/8 with trample, and when it comes into play, each opponent may search his or her library for a creature card, put it into play, then each player who searches their library shuffles it. Cool. So, yes, it is a rather big boy that you're giving away to one of your opponents, but it's goated and it has haste, so they're going to be using this big boy to swing at one of your opponents, do some damage, and then it's gone at the end of the turn. But it also allows you and everybody else, besides the person you gave it to cheat a creature into play, so that's kind of nice there. Phyrexian Negator. When it's dealt damage, sacrifice a permanent for each 1 damage dealt to it. So it's a 5/5. Again, this is goaded. They have to swing. So as soon as it connects with something, it's doing up to. They're going to have to sacrifice up to 5 of their permanents. So kind of board wiping themselves there. Eben Blade Reaper. When it attacks, you lose half your life rounded up. And if it deals combat damage to a player, that player loses half their life rounded up. It's a 1/1. Most likely, it's not connecting for combat damage, but since it's goaded, they do have to attack with it, so they will be losing half of their life. Hellcarver Demon. It's a 6/6 with flying. When it deals combat damage to a player, sacrifice all other permanents you control and discard your hand. Exile the top 6 cards to your library. You may cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. So this is a bit of a risky play, giving it to one of your opponents. Now, if they do have a very strong board state, this can be huge. It can wipe them out, take out all of their plan, and they're starting over from square one. Yes, they are getting up to 6 cards that they can put onto the battlefield, but it's probably not going to be what they were planning on or as good as what they had before. Bronze Bombshell. When a player other than Bronze Bombshell's owner controls it, that player sacrifices it. If that player does, it deals 7 damage to him or her. So this is another one where, like, why would anybody have Bronze Bombshell except for you? Well, because you're giving it to them, and now suddenly that's 7 damage to their face. Tempting Worm. When it comes into play, each opponent may put any number of artifact, creature, enchantment, and or land cards from his or her hand into play. So everybody but the player that's being gifted this can just dump their hand onto the battlefield and set up a better board state for themselves, including you, which is the big part. World Gorger Dragon. When it comes into play, remove all of the permanents you control from the game, but then when it leaves, you get them all back. So temporarily that leaves your opponent who gets it wide open. And again, 7/7 with flying and trample, so they're going to be doing damage to your other opponents as well too. Jagged Puppet. When it's dealt damage, discard that many cards. So again, it has to swing, so you're going to be forcing your opponents to lose a lot of their cards. Plague Reaver. This can play out in a couple different ways. At the beginning of each end step, sacrifice each other creature you control. So if your opponent has on their board, it can wipe their board. Now the one thing though is your commander does cause them to exile it at the end step. So if you don't want this exiled, you can lay it yourself, discard 2 cards, and then sacrifice it, choose target opponent, return Plague Reaver to the battlefield under that player's control at the beginning of their next upkeep. So you can pass this on by playing it yourself, pass it on, discard 2 cards, which again helps you. You're getting more stuff into your graveyard, filling that up, and then passing it on to someone else, and then they have to either, discard cards from their hand, which will be putting them back, or they'll have to get rid of all of their creatures. So a couple different ways that can play out. Hired Giant. When it comes into play, enters the battlefield, each other player may search his or her library for a land card, put that card into play, then shuffle the library. So you give this to one of your opponents, and now you and everybody else besides that opponent gets to ramp a little bit. Not a big deal, but again, kind of nice for you. Now, these last 5, these are really the key ones. Soul Gorger Org. When it comes into play, you lose all but 1 life. So again, you get this into your graveyard, you wait for it to be an opponent's turn, you tap, send that over to your opponent, their life total comes down to 1, hit them with a lightning bolt, they're dead. Abyssal Persecutor. It's a 6/6 flying trample. You can't win the game, and your opponents can't lose the game. What a fun treat to give your opponents. Again, you don't want that on the battlefield under your control, but giving it to one of your opponents so they can't win the game that turn. These ones, these 3, these are by far the worst cards. Eater of Days. When Eater of Days comes into play, you skip your next 2 turns. Giving this to one of your opponents, that can pretty much be GG's for them. having to go 2 more turns without being able to do anything, that is rough in a game like Commander. Leveler. When Leveler comes into play, remove your library from the game. This is pretty much one and done. You give it to an opponent, they lose their library, have to attack one of your opponents with a 10-10, and when it gets back to their turn, game over for them. Almost the same thing, not quite as strong, but Inverter of Truth. When Inverter of Truth enters the battlefield, exile all cards from your library face down, then shuffle all cards from your graveyard into your library. So again, this could leave an opponent with very few cards left to draw from. So there's, again, a couple different ways to really just mess with your opponent's plans. Your big ones, your main ones that you're looking for is like a Leveler, Eater of Days, the Soul Gorger Org. There's a couple big ones in particular where giving it to your opponent is pretty much game over for them. So again, this deck, you want to move as quickly as possible. You want to take what seems like a fairly friendly idea of your own creatures from your graveyard, handing them out to your opponents, and absolutely ruining their day with friendliness. Well, not really friendliness. But anyway, if you liked this little deck build here, go ahead and build the deck yourself. Like, subscribe, and we'll see you guys next time.